Good morning, friends. It's good to see you all. My name is Shreyas Deshmukh. I work with Delhi Policy Group as a research associate, and we welcome you to all the first Fireside chats on Asian Pathfinder. And as you know, the brain behind this initiative is Pallavi Ade. So, Pallavi, could you please tell us in brief what is this idea and what is this initiative all about?
All
Over to
right,
you.
perfect. Shreyas, I might be the idea, but I think a lot of the credit also goes to you for being the execution and the big support, because I went to Shreyas with this idea some time ago and I said, what do you think about this? Because we've always had this discussion about having a platform where people can come together and express ideas, do some presentations, brainstorm with people, and just to bring the community together, be it from the scholarly community as well as practitioners. Because when we work in this field of political science, international security, a lot of us end up working in silos where we can't reach out to a lot of our colleagues who are working on very similar research, possibly. But how do we know that, say, Pallavi and Shreyas are working on something very similar, but they can collaborate because our research skills, how we think, are very different sometimes, our analytical skills. So create a collaborative community is what we wanted this to be. So we are going to have presentations from people. We've had a lot of topics already come in, so we are working on getting the schedule in. We'll share it. I know that few of you who are here right now have already said they'd like to present on certain topics, so that's really great. It's encouraging. So it's just a way for you to come together. If you have an idea, I sometimes work on ideas that I want to brainstorm on, but I don't know whom to go to a lot of times. So it's just a way for us to come together, and also a way for people who are younger professionals, definitely. A lot of us don't get that kind of opportunity or don't know where to look. So it's also a platform for younger professionals to express themselves. So feel free, this is a safe zone. Please come and, express your ideas, write to us. We'll be happy to take on anything. If you're working on a specific research and you want to present to someone without you doing it on the public forum, right? Come to us, we can give you a feedback. So it's just one of the ways that we want this community to grow. It's just a community for people to feel safe in to express their ideas, because we want to have a constructive dialogue, and also a knowledge sharing platform, right? Because there is so much happening in our world. These things, events change on a very daily basis, on an hourly basis. We live in the age under the shadow of COVID-19, but even before COVID-19, our world wasn't really going great in terms of how the events were happening. So be it the climate change, or be it conflicts in the Middle East and North Africa, or be the politics in US and elsewhere. So it's a lot of uncertainty, and this is just a way for us to support each other through these uncertain times. And I am going to hand it over to Shreyas because he is the master of the ceremony. So over to you, Shreyas.
Thank you, Pallavi. Thank you for that brief introduction. So, before we are commencing this session, I would like to go through a few housekeeping rules which are already given in your chat, but I would like to read it out because this is the first fireside chats. Uh, Henceforth, the speaker will present for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we will open for questions. And by default, all participants are muted. So, however, we do want this to be an engaging discussion. So either you can send me your questions in personal chat, or you can just raise your hand so we can unmute you and you can ask your question directly. So just a disclaimer for all the participants that kindly refrain from making political, religious, hate or extremist comments, and no abusive language. So because it is important for us to respect the views of everyone and have a discussion in constructive manner. Now coming back to today's topic, that is importance of geopolitical risk analysis for businesses in India. So Pallavi, we met few years back and I worked in your team as a geopolitical risk analyst. Since then, the nature of the threat is keep evolving and increasing for businesses. particularly. Now everything has come to standstill, as you said, due to pandemic. So before going into threats, could you please explain the terminologies such as what does the threat and risk means for businesses? Over to you,
Sure.
Pallavi.
Thank you. So just to start my presentation, I'm going to use slide as a guidance, but like I said, we're going to speak more, just have a discussion. Not as no one's claiming here to be a subject matter expert, so just that. And just for us to understand a few terminologies. So in terms of, can you see the next screen? It's not. Is it going to the next screen, Shreyas?
No.
Sorry, I just will stop sharing. Sorry, guys, technical issues. We have all these things coming up because of we're using technology, and sorry, because this is just our first presentation. So is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So just to go over it. So like Shreyas said, the topic for today is importance of geopolitical risk analysis for businesses in India. One of the reasons why it's important to look at geopolitical risk analysis is, like I said earlier, a very uncertain world that we are living in. And it's, okay, sorry, it just keeps doing this. I don't know why it does that. So I am going to, it's for some reason doing some issues, so I'm not going to stick to. So I think one of the things that I like in terms of quotes is the Aristotle quote, right? It okay, yes. So one thing we can expect is the unexpected. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's just because nothing stays constant, everything is changing. The nature of the work that we do, the world that we live in, it's so unexpected that it's very difficult to actually do a very predictive analysis a lot of times to know what's happening. I think last year, if someone would have asked us, do we see us staying at home for more than what, 2.5 months? I don't think anyone would have said, are you crazy? I want to go to office. Anyone would have said companies are going to allow work from home for even the strictest regulated sectors. Anyone would have said, no ways. Company, we have strong regulations from SEBI, from the information technology ministries and their customers. But we have companies doing that. So we can always expect the unexpected. And just it's important for you to analyze before you leave, though, because business is about taking those managed risk. Anything is about taking managed risk, right? When you go for higher education, when you do something, you look at what could be the pros and cons of something. When you invest in a new project, you look at what are the pros and cons of that project before you invest. So it's about taking those managed risks, and that's very important. You can't just leap, because if I'm leaping into a swimming pool, I think I need to know that I know how to swim, right? I can't just leap in and say, oh, I'll figure when I get in the water. It's not that. I would have done some analysis. I would have done some basic training about it before I go leap in. So exactly that, what this image says. What Shreyas said about knowing the terminologies, I think it's very important to know the basic differences between different incidents. What is an incident? What is an accident? What is a crisis when it happens? What is an emergency? Disaster? What is a hazard? So a lot of times a hazard can be your natural hazards, where there is less of a human intent of making destruction. Disasters can be man-made or natural disasters. I have put in the image of the Australian fires, the bushfires which happened earlier this year. So those are a combination of natural and man-made disasters happening together. So those kind of things we are seeing a lot more in our world. And that's one of the things that we should be aware of. What is the differences between these terminologies? You can expand this list and make a lot of other different kind of terms, but it's very important. I've just put the main ones, especially when you're doing geopolitical analysis. It's very important to know these differences. I could have a control over an emergency because it is something that I would have had my plans and procedures in place. It could be a fire emergency, but when I have not had, so the disaster that happened in Vizag recently, the LG factory, the polymer factory, that's kind of a disaster waiting to happen. They would have had emergency procedures in place, but those procedures weren't followed when the factory reopened for after nearly months. So a small event which could have been controlled turned into a disaster. So that's very important for us to understand, that it could start as an event and turn into a disaster too if we don't put in right measures at the right time, right place. So that's very important. Uh, so just a few definitions to note before we proceed. I think anytime you do a risk analysis, it's very important for us to understand what is a threat, what is a vulnerability, and what are the gaps or weaknesses. So before you do a risk analysis. So a threat is an event, or it's a source of a risk. So it's what generates your risk. A vulnerability is what would be exploited by a threat. A threat actor would exploit it. It can be a human, it can be a man-made, a natural, a cyber, any realm, right? So there is a lot of overlap between the physical and the cyber realm also. But we don't want to talk much about it, but just to understand that a threat is just a source of risk. The vulnerability is the gap. So if you haven't done your gap analysis, you haven't understood where your gaps are, the probability of your threat manifesting into big risk for your organization is there. So that's very important. So, and risk is measured in terms of the likelihood of it happening and the probability, likelihood, probability, and the severity of that impact. So it can just be a risk which can have a very small impact on your organization, and it can be high likelihood. Sometimes you just may not want to consider. Sometimes some risks are inherent in your organization. They're inherent to the system, and some are generated. So it's very important to also know these kind of risks. So just moving forward. Just the definitions to note. What is, again, just to say, what is threat assessment? You outline the threats. Again, this is done in a very constructive manner. There are procedures in place. There are parameters on which you evaluate, and it changes as per your business, as per your organization. And just to clarify what a business is, right? A business can be any entity, because we keep on speaking businesses. So I just want to ensure we are very clear. A business or an organization can have, it can be a very small organization, can be a very niche organization. We sometimes think, oh, small organizations are not going to be impacted by, say, a geopolitical risk, but it's a misnomer, because a lot of times if you're a small organization, especially if you're an R&D lab, which is established, say, in India, you might have just a 10 man force here, but you're a very, very highly regulated sector, say pharma sector, which is very highly regulated, the health sector. So if you're an R&D lab operating in India in a very highly regulated environment, you would be impacted by any developments in geopolitical if the government changes the norms. So that's important. Again, so that's a threat. You've done your threat assessments to your key assets. You don't have to do for everything in your organization. You don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the money, but remember, this takes time and money. So you have to be very clear at the back end what your threats are and what your key assets are. You have identified this before going ahead. Vulnerability assessment is basically like a systematic review of your weaknesses and what is the severity of that happening and how would it impact. And risk assessment is the overall procedure or process of identifying your risk, analyzing it, evaluating it, your learning. And I think risk management process, to just say it, is doing that entire risk process that you do, right? You apply your policies and procedures and practices in place before you go ahead. So that's important. That's over with the boring stuff, guys. I don't like definitions ever, never liked it in my master's, but we have to do that just to clear the fundas. So to the fun part, geopolitical risk. Just it shows you how jumbled these things are, right? There's so many things, and I've just created what could be just the few things that could be part of your geopolitical. It can be an exhaustive list. You can go on and on. So again, just political risk is a political disruption by an action of a state or a non-state actor. Remember, a lot of times there are non-state actors which become political actors. Your Greenpeace, a non-state actor, but it becomes a political actor when it enters the activism stage. Geopolitical risk is basically anything which is political, socioeconomic, cultural, which impacts your business. So there is a Gallup survey of 2007 2015, sorry, which says that of 1,000 investors, and 75% rank geopolitical risk of military conflicts or conflicts between states as a bigger risk than economic uncertainty. Not sure they're going to say that now after COVID-19 because of the economic uncertainty, but again, this risk has not gone away even in the COVID-19 era. So yeah, that's
So, Pallavi, before going ahead, could you please
sorry.
uh, uh, write it only? What are the type of risk in the Indian? What are the risk? Your like terminologies in today's context. You just listed out all the terminologies, but which are those geopolitical risks you are seeing right now, and how they are going to impact businesses in near future?
Okay, so one of the things would be in because we are in the overarching shadow of COVID-19, right? So I think the risk, one of the bigger risks would be how trade relations are impacted between countries right now. Uh, so this is a pandemic which is global in nature, right? It can cross borders. It's micron size and it can cross borders like this without any passport, any flight. It just can get on a human's body and go. So there are a lot of countries which are becoming apprehensive about each other. Uh, how countries are treating this kind of a virus. So it's a global pandemic, but we haven't seen the kind of global response that a pandemic is meant to generate. We've had countries becoming inward looking. In some countries, even states have become locally those. So that kind of gives you a very move away. We've lived in a globalization era, so we can see that deglobalization could happen, and there's a lot of scholars which have been talking about deglobalization, decoupling of different trade relations, how the US is acting towards WHO and international organizations under Trump. So those kind of things, the whole multilateralism that we've talked about. So companies have relied on these kind of multilateral cooperation between companies have relied on these multilateral cooperations between countries. But that kind of multilateral cooperation could just see becoming countries becoming more protectionist, more inward looking. So that's one of the major things we see in the coming year. Uh, Another thing would be just that it causes a lot of internal tensions. So there's a report by the Australian universities, the big Australian universities, who submitted to the government and said, we'd like to open up, get international students. But they've said, oh, we are going to have these strict rules. And the countries of the students, the home countries, should have taken very strong measures against COVID-19 for the students to come. So that who determines these strong measures? How does it happen? Those can also cause those geopolitical tensions. And I think one of the last things would be that for me is how we China. So how is China's going to be China's role going to be going forward is very important. So how is China going to see the world after COVID-19? They are opening up. They have started having their party meet and everything. But how would they see the entire world is very important for us. So, and there are going to be companies who are operating in China who would want to move out. So that's kind of the shift we're seeing. There's a pressure on international organizations to move out, companies who are operating in China. One of the biggest gainers out of this has been Vietnam. So do look up how Vietnam has managed to benefit from this. So, and one of the reasons why people are moving to Vietnam is that the Vietnamese political system and cultural system is considered uh, similar, not the same, definitely not, but a lot in lines with how China is, the communist regime and everything. So that's for me. Shes?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So just carrying on to what Shreyas said, right? The recent developments in the this is just till COVID-19 hit us. What have been the other things? The US-China trade war. It's been looming over us for some time now. The US-Iran tensions, the UK elections that have happened, the Brexit that's happening, the Taliban deal. Sorry, I forgot to label this, but the Taliban deal. What we saw at the start of this year, the oil market slump, the way the West Texas Brent crashed below zero, right? That's a big thing. The instability, the political instability in Israel, where they have had series of elections before they have come up with a kind of coalition between these two, who are aiming to be prime minister and prime ministers, plus the corruption charges against the Benjamin Netanyahu, and obviously the protest in Hong Kong. This is something to watch out for over the next couple of months also, because China, Hong Kong government is getting the new security law. They're looking to pass that. So you might just see an increase in protests in Hong Kong again. So that's very important for us to understand. Just moving on to the next slide. So impact on business. So basically, how does these things impact on a business? A Federal Reserve Board, the Federal Bank's Reserve Board in US, did a report in 2018, which found that higher geopolitical risk depresses the economic activity. How does it impact companies? It can change the fiscal landscape you're operating in, the license conditions, currency controls, so demonetization, right? Judicial insecurity, corruption happens. A lot of African countries have rampant corruption. Not that it's not there in other places, but there's a lot of exploitation in these countries, which is also linked into the corruption aspect of it. So how do you do business in such kind of countries? If you're a British company, you have the UK bribery law over you. So how would you go ahead and do business in, say, an African country where corruption is that rampant? So those are things you have to take into consideration. The reputational damage that it can cause to your company. These are a few things. And obviously it can be part of your economic slowdown and everything. It impacts your business as well as the security of your employees, your assets. And again, very important to understand, it varies from company to company. It can also vary from project to project, geography to geography, for an industry also. And also who the investor's nationality is. So what we spoke about deglobalization, what Shreyas asked me, the investor's nationality is very important because say Huawei, we know about the whole controversy over how Huawei has been treated in the Western world because of its association with the Chinese Communist Party, considered to associate. So Huawei is a big infrastructure supporter for your telecom sector, one of the biggest, Ericsson and Huawei. But if you're Huawei, you want to go invest in, say, a UK or a Germany or a US, definitely not, but any other countries, how would you approach it? So these are just a few things to note. Okay, just to the fun part, guys. Can someone guess what this map is about, please? And Shreyas, you can tell me the answers. I want to, so you can type in the chat section what your guess is about this map. What does this map signify? Just type in the chat section, please. So what are the guesses, Shreyas? Any?
The first guess by Radhika is social media presence, internet connectivity.
Okay.
Rahul said it's connectivity. Tapan says it's oil stocking. Charumati says it's sea routes connectivity.
Okay.
And so they said China trade expansion.
Okay. So Radhika is on bang in a way, because it's the Facebook usage around the world, how Facebook is connecting this world. So that's where it is. So Radhika, sorry, don't have any gifts for you, but yeah, great guessing. So the next map is, again, guess please. No right and wrong answers, guys, for us to learn. So go ahead. Trust me, I remember things more when I give a wrong answer and someone tells me the right answer about it later. So next time you see this image, you'll know what the right answer is. Because guess what? For the Facebook
We
one, I
got
always
few
got it right.
answers.
Yes,
So
please.
Rahul says it's sea lanes of communication.
Okay.
Sanket says it's this Amazon presence now.
I should get that image, Sanket. Thanks for the idea, though. Next time I want to use the Amazon presence. Okay, so this is, yeah, you are, there are more?
Yeah, there are more. Radhika says naval connectivity.
Okay.
Tapan says trade routes. Ashmita, sea routes connectivity. And Sushil sir says it's air routes.
So she's right, obviously. It's air routes over 24. World Economic Forum took this report from, I think, 3 years ago. This flight over just 24 hours. So not even like routes, it's just 24 hours, the amount of flights that have gone over the world. And the last image, if I know we know who these two people are, but do you know the connection between these two? Because that also tells you how business and geopolitics are so interlinked. So Jeff Bezos, the one of the richest man in the world, the Amazon guy, and your MBS, that's your crown prince, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. How are these two linked?
No answers. Yeah,
Okay,
there is one. There is one. Rahul says the hacking of Jeff Bezos' personal device.
perfect. So there we go. And I think it's important to see this, right? Because Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post contributor, was killed, and obviously MBS was seen as one of the person ordering it. And then came the hacking of Jeff Bezos's phone and the whole. So you realize your CEO, the one of the richest man in the world's affairs, can go public just because of geopolitics. So his personal life became a public thing to share because of his, because also background story, Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos. So you do realize how these things are interlinked, just for you to understand. So getting to the type of risks, just for us to understand geopolitics, internal conflicts, laws and regulations, breaches of contract, corruption. Internal conflicts is one of the things going forward can be a big issue for us. Again, the geopolitics of it, we already spoke. Companies changing laws, regulation, policies. I think in terms of orders of importance, it's something all of these have some kind of significance, depends on the sector you're in. So social activism, also in the age of social media, right? Everything can go viral at the click of a button. Everyone is a journalist now. You're just a person with a mobile phone and you're a journalist. You can spread the news like wildfire. True or not, that's the best part, right? No one knows. It just keeps sharing. In an era of COVID-19, the amount of fake news I've got, I can actually just fill entire presentation on it. So yeah. And just one thing is Black Swan events. This is a famous quote by Donald Rumsfeld, the US Department of Defense press briefing. So he spoke about unknown unknowns, the things that we know we don't know. So these are things like your COVID-19s and things like the things which are already, we're not aware that these can happen and we are not even prepared for it. So there's a art book by Taleb, which is what introduced this term in popular usage. But yes, so yeah, just before, who are the actors? Like I said, it can be an individual with a camera, your local bodies, your special interest group, your political parties, governments, obviously, non-state actors, transnational actors. These are actors who can cross borders. Your hackers, actually, in the era of digital age. Your hackers are also one of the big things. You can have a hacktivist also. Anonymous is a hacktivist, right? They are transnational groups. Supranationals, your UN, WHO, NATO's, your OPECs, everything, GCC countries. And lastly, private organizations. I know Gates Foundation is everyone's favorite these days, but the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons and Alibabas of the world. So that's the one. And just before, anyone Anything you'd like to ask anyone? Shresh, do you have any pointers you'd like to before I
Yep,
move into the
Pallavi, before going ahead, could you just explain what are the types of risk in Indian context, basically for the businesses which are operating in India? Can you just elaborate on that more?
Sure. I think just to go over the type of risk, right? Again, uh, geopolitics. So in an Indian context, we'll have something more going ahead. But just to give you a brief, interstate wars, interstate conflicts for that matter, the border tension right now between India and China. We've had the Doklam issue earlier. So those kind of regional conflicts for India, regional. What happens? Internal conflicts. What we had, the protest over citizenship amendment bill, or when we have elections in India, that can actually cause conflicts because elections in some parts of India can turn violent. The Maoist insurgencies, uh, laws, regulations, demonetization is one of them. Breaches of contracts. So this is something which happens, say a government changes, right? You are an organized company which has a construction deal, but a government changes. This has happened a couple of times in India now. Not naming any state governments, but this has happened in terms of breaches of contract where the government said, oh, we are going to scrap this project, we are going to move on to next. Similar project, but given to someone else. So there you go. You've invested so much time and effort into it, and there we go. Everything goes out of the window. Corruption, everyone's aware. Corruptions can just be bribery or else other forms of corruption. And like I said, systematic corruption is part of it. It becomes endemic after a point. Uh, Again, social activism has become big. What I said, citizen journalism. So in Indian context, one of the major things going forward is how misinformation also spreads in India very fast, and the role of media. How media in India sometimes is not always educating the right in the right way to the citizens, and a lot of people, not you and me, maybe we will rely on the internet, but a lot of people in the smaller towns, rural areas, still rely a lot of news on television. So it's important that the news is more responsible. Uh, there was a scare a couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, a week ago, about the virus being in tomatoes. That was totally a fake news. One of the TV news channels actually did a clip on it. So those type of information, misinformation spreading is a big thing. Uh, Thankfully, we've not had any terrorism activities in India in recent years in the large scale that we've seen after Mumbai. But yes, that threat never goes away because the actors are still there. The threat actors still exist. So and cyber threats is one of the biggest threats for organizations all across the world. So it just doesn't have to be in India. It has to be, it can be anywhere. So that's that. Just moving forward, like I said, in the Indian context, why geopolitical risk analysis is important because these are just a few factors that I could think of. I'm sure this is a very long list. One of the things is the non-political threats, which can manifest into political risk or geopolitical risk. So a climate change, for that matter, it could be an environmental issue as well as a non-political threat, which can become a political risk. Uh, Again, center-state relations in a country like India, center-state relations are very important. Uh, Unavailability of labor, especially given the current migrant crisis that we have ongoing in India. Uh, there could be just be a shortage of labor in the urban areas if we've already had a mass exodus. If this exodus continues, how would organizations employ blue collar workers in urban areas to build our urban areas? So be it construction or other parts. So how would that work? That's going to be one of the things. So that's there. Uh, so again, just continue. This is just what's happened since Jan, COVID-19. Uh, Again, not just how it happens in India, but how we are acting with other countries. When we say send hydrochloroquine to US, that's also part of our geopolitical diplomacy. And then again, it's COVID-19 related, but it's part of it. These are just a few things that have happened. And these are important not just for businesses operating in India, right? But just any business which is entering India. One of my favorites is India-Malaysia relations because when the CAA protests started in India, Malaysia took a strong stand and India stopped the imports of palm oil from Malaysia. We restarted it recently and not only that, we also signed a big deal to have uh, Malaysia import a lot of our rice, one of the biggest deals. So we see how these change over just a few months period. So geopolitics is not constant. It's a very dynamic thing. Uh, just coming to the last part, I think, why should businesses monitor? It's good for your financial health, business continuity and operations uh, can go on. And it's moving towards the organizational resilience aspect of it, not just coming back to business, right? Like coming back to operations, but having a culture of organizational resilience, safety and security of your assets and your employees, and it affects your brand. Uh, One thing was, if you when the Hong Kong protests were happening last year, when they were at their peak, the Cathay Pacific CEO had to resign because a couple of employees had to be let go because they participated in the Hong Kong protests. So you do realize how your brand image is impacted just with a political development or geopolitical development. And again, planning helps you stay ahead of the curve. It mitigates the mitigation measures to help you reduce the impact. And it helps you prepare for any political volatility in the global order going forward. So that's there. Uh, so what are the ways? Just these are basic, right? You have risk mitigation strategies in place. You accept the risk, you reduce, you transfer. Transfer is kind of insurance. So there are organizations which actually do political risk insurance because a lot of companies operate in high risk areas. So high risk can be high benefit also. So you accept that risk, but you also transfer it to someone else in case. One of my best things is how do you transfer risk? Wimbledon, COVID-19. Wimbledon took out a pandemic insurance of about 1. I had written down the number, 1.9 million per year since the 2003 SARS outbreak. Guess what? French Open didn't have. So Wimbledon got cancelled this year. They got a payout of 144 million because every year they paid only 25 million and they got a payout of that. So that's how you mitigate these kind of risks. You have to have a qualitative and quantitative. You have to forecast. And one of the things is horizon scan. There are small changes that you prepare for. You know these are happening. But there are these Mike Tysons of the world, right? They'll just deliver that sucker punch, like the COVID-19 for us. So that's what. Uh, just for you to understand what are different assessment models. Uh, these are just the shortcuts industry uses. You can do it as per your organization. Then the framework for risk mitigation is you have to identify, measure, manage, monitor, report, and you keep doing this. This doesn't end. This is a very continuous process. So it's important to keep doing it. And everything is important. You keep going back and checking. Has anything changed? You go modify. Either something's happened, say you never prepared for COVID-19, you've done a framework, you include COVID-19 in it now, but you also go back and check if there are anything else that you need to update and change. So just going before I sign off and hand it over to Shreyas, just few things I like to monitor. You is always any organization that you're working in. Most important is the bullet point, third one on the left side, have your senior management buy-in. So your seniors have to give you that go ahead before you start doing a lot of changes or giving brilliant ideas. If you don't have the budget, right? It's all money related also. You need to have the budget. Again, outside your organization, be aware of the media biases. A lot of medias have their leanings, and it's very important. Everyone has a right, it's a freedom of speech, but you know to know as an analyst before moving ahead, what is the bias of those medias. And again, it's an analysis they're asking, so it's good to keep your personal biases and opinions aside. And verify and validate, please. Sanket, coming back to what you said, this is a map on China's global mega projects. So we do see the Chinese footprint all over the world. And I think it's just tells you the presence of China. And I think this is not even the latest one. So you do realize the geopolitics of business here on its full glory. And this is one of my favorite images. It just tells you the geopolitical anomalies. It's a 2008 map, by the way. It's so 12 years old. but it's just a sample. Uh, who's the bifurcation country? Fresh land, where are the conflicts? So it's just, they've tried to come up with it. Uh, and it just tells you what a confusing. So I think it's just going, before I sign off, I think I'll just say that it's very important to have a systematic, and there's a lot of noise. So you need to know what is important for you, and filter that before you go ahead and do your analysis. And just if anyone wants to get in touch, I'm just going to leave my contact details here for you to get in touch. And Shreyas, it's over to you.
Thank you, Pallavi. Thank you so much for that informative presentation. And now we'll head for our question and answer session. We have about 15 minutes in our hand. And we have already one question from Sam sir for Pallavi.
Awesome.
So the question is, will the migrant labor come back? And we will have deurbanization of mega cities in the new work from home anywhere environment.
Okay, has to be some. So I think one of the things is the migrant laborers have gone. So unless there is an employment generation in the villages, we would see a return, but maybe not on the larger number. A lot of people, migrants, were feeling disheartened over the fact that they had to go back and they didn't get that support. So, but I think the government would have to take a much more constructive approach on getting these migrants back, because we need to need these people also. It's not that they, just because we need them, it's also important for the overall economy's health that these people have to be brought back. So the government also has to put in measures. The way we had trains taking them back to their villages, that's great, just helping them, trains and buses taking them. We also have to have these kind of efforts for them to come back. And it's important for organizations also to realize the value that these migrant laborers add to their organizations. So I think it has to be a effort, a more constructive and a more planned effort to get them back. And for the ones who choose to live in their villages back, I think they have to be they have to have employment generated. So I don't think that would lead to a rapid deurbanization, because our cities do play a big role in the society, and also the whole aspiration of actually going to the city to work after a point still stays alive. So maybe in the short term we might see these migrants going, but as the new people start entering the labor force, because we are a country of young people, we'll see these people still wanting to migrate to cities. Maybe they would go to cities which are closer to their home towns, so that could see more rapid urban areas coming up. But I don't see a complete de-urbanization of people due to this flight.
Thank you, Pallavi. We have another question from Gauri. Given the importance of geopolitical analysis, are Indian businesses actually investing in it? Conversely, what career prospect do geopolitical analysts have in India's corporate sector at present?
All right, so yes, a lot of companies are investing. So what Shreyas spoke about, we working together. We work together with Samsung and Sushisa, who are on this call. So that was MidCat. And there are a lot of organizations like this. What Rosita, who's one of the participants here, she works for Max Security. So there are a lot of these organizations, because companies in India, from when I started, and I'm sure Samsung, I think, Shreyas, once I'm done, you should give Samsung and Sushita the right to speak about this, because they are the right people to answer this question. But I think we have been there, and I think there is a prospect, there's a growing prospect, and companies are more aware. So yes, there is a more interest in working on this for companies. And yes, it's still a niche field, Gauri. It's still growing, not say as a Western world. But yes, there's a growing interest from organizations as well as younger professionals who are entering this field to look at this. So, yes.
Thank you, Pallavi. Sushil sir, if you'd like to explain more about this question, particularly the first question Gauri asked about importance of geopolitical analysis in Indian businesses.
Yeah, thank you, Pallavi and Shreyas. Can you hear me? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Oh, thanks for redirecting the question. I'm not keeping my video on because I have a little bandwidth issue. But firstly, let me congratulate both of you. Amazing session, and I feel so proud of having worked with both of you in our organization in MidCat. And to answer Gauri's question, I think yes, and there is a wonderful scope today for young analysts, for young students, for young professionals to come into the field of geopolitical analysis. And because more and more companies today are investing not only in hiring individual analysts of this sort, but more and more companies are putting in place command centers which actually have a mix of geopolitical analysis of internal risks, and they require smart young people for this. Another aspect is that a lot of MNCs which are based in India now have grown in prominence in the South Asian or APAC region. So their APAC command centers and their South Asia command centers are very often based in India, and they find Indian analysts a good bet because of the kind of language skills, the spoken English skills, written skills, as well as the kind of analysis exposure that they get in some of the good universities and the good colleges in India. I think there is great scope. Don't lose hope. Pick up qualifications, diversify your skills, and I must also add, which I put on the chat, that we have a wonderful weekend course now, which we've run 4 editions of that, which is specifically targeted at young professionals who want to get into the field of geopolitical analysis and corporate intelligence. So check it out on our LinkedIn website, on our LinkedIn profile, or on our Facebook page. You'll learn more, and we'll be happy to accommodate you. If you're a student, there are wonderful student discounts also available. I hope that answers my question. I managed to round it off with a little bit of marketing, Pallavi.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same thing. So guess what? I and Shreyas have learned under Sushil sir and Samsa. And a lot of what we've learned is what we are trying to share with the world. So it started with them, and we are trying to just pass on the knowledge. So definitely check out their courses. And that's Shreyas. Moving on to the next question.
Yes. So we have a question from Sanket. He's asking, do you envisage conflict in rural areas given demigration of labor due to COVID-19?
Okay, great question, Sanket. And something is, again, going back to what Samsa's question, right? It is very important that there is a rural employment generation, if I would say, and there has to be a way of managing. So I think in a conflict like this, where there's a potential for conflict, then it's very important that the local bodies are involved. Your local gram panchayats, your zilla parishads are actively involved in creating this kind of employment and opportunities and managing the law and order situation. So awareness of these local bodies, be it your police, be it your sarpanch in the gaon, it has to start from there. It has to be a very overall process, of a holistic process where you get all these different divisions together to ensure that these kind of conflicts don't arise. Potential for it, we can't ever predict, right? It's a human nature. If there is no employment, we've had seen social unrest before because of unemployment and everything. So there's a possibility, but it can be avoided if the local bodies are very actively involved in educating people, managing this kind of issues that could arise. So it's, again, what you say, right? We spoke about earlier, horizon scanning. You scan it's just not for an organization. We speak for business, for even governments. They have to do that kind of forecast of this can just happen. You have to foresight it. So that's very important to do that. And I think it can be, again, I'll go back. Local bodies in India are very important given the size of the country that we have.
Thank you, Pallavi. And there is a last question because we are running out of time. It is from Charumati. So Charumati is asking, which are the reports and intelligence reports and monitors we are supposed to follow for the businesses?
Okay, Charu, that's a very exhaustive list. I will try and do this is I have a list of everyone. So MidCat is one. They monitor very well in India. Max is one, what Rosita spoke about. There are Grid 91s, which works on terrorism. So these are a lot of consultancies which work in India. There's Stratfor for that matter. There is Control Risk Group. So there are a lot of these organizations as well as governments which monitor, right? The US government monitors, the British government monitors. They actively advise companies also when they're coming to India. So there are a lot of these lists. I will try my best to compile some of these sources which you can refer to, and I'll definitely share it with the people who are on the meeting today.
Thank you, Pallavi. Now we're running out of time, so this is last 1 minute for you if you want to make any comment or
No,
any further. Then anything about fireside chats and how we are going to go about it in next week or further. So if you want to make any.
perfect. Thank you, Shreyas. Again, thank you everyone for joining in. It's just an idea, but you guys have come out and supported us. So I think we wanted just a democratic forum. We are in India, right? So make it democratic and have a forum where all of us can participate. So thank you everyone who's come out and supported us. We'll have it every Saturday for now. We've decided just so that everyone's work schedules are accommodated. And we will have that going forward every Saturday or level. We have a few topics. The topic that's coming up next week, we'll share it with you by early next week. And definitely, trust me, there's a variety of topics from regional security, political Islam to geopolitical analysis, more Afghanistan, water crisis, climate change. We have a lot of topics which have been given in. So definitely watch out. And again, there are a lot of people who are looking to collaborate also. So if you want to collaborate with someone else and present, please go ahead. So just write to us, write to me or write to Shreyas or write to us. You have our IDs and we'll be happy to do that. And over to you, Shreyas, the master of the event.
Thank you so much, Pallavi, for that wonderful presentation and explanations. So thank you all for joining today's conversation. If you have any suggestions to improve this platform, please pass on to me or Pallavi. As Pallavi said, you have all our contact details. And if you want to present on any subject, share your ideas with us so we can find a slot for you. And hope to see you all on next Saturday. Until then, take care and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.